more. But I want to welcome everybody, and I'm going to do something. We've had a lot of speakers come through, a lot of which I'm familiar with, but I don't really actually know that well. That's not the case today. So I'm not going to read off a script. I'm going to do the best I can, and Dr. Ball, Jared, if I leave something out, please let me, but I think I wouldn't be doing him justice if I was kind of reading off of a script. I am the assistant director for the Nyumburu Cultural Center. I'm joined by my colleague over here, Andre Nottingham, who's the assistant director for advancement. We celebrate Black History Month throughout the year, 365 days a year. So if this is your first time here, please don't make it your last. Look forward to seeing you more and more. We have programs throughout the entire year, and this is one of them. This is sponsored by our Leadership Series program, where we try to expose students and also faculty, staff, participants. So it's not just students, but we also have faculty, staff, participants with a range of leadership philosophies, from everyone from Kwame Ture to Kwame Nkrumah to Garvey, Malcolm X, Ella Baker, Fannie Hamer, so that folks can be exposed to a lot of different leadership philosophies and narratives that, quite frankly, have been suppressed, especially if they've grown up in the United States. And so once in a while we have speakers come in, and I thought I had an opportunity to interview Jared a couple weeks ago, and I just thought it would be fitting and apropos to bring him back here. He's familiar with this campus. He did his PhD work here in media studies, and he'll tell you more about that. But I'm going to go off script. I've known Jared since he was making mixtapes. He was making mixtapes, yeah, and not as an MC, but he would put together these dope mixtapes, mixed CDs that had all kinds of revolutionary messages in between. It was music that today often would be suppressed by corporate media airwaves. So it would be everything from Dead Prez, Immortal Technique. I mean, you can go on and on. And he would hand them out for free. Would actually like a guerrilla artist, man. He would just go and just hand them out and hand them out for free. And you could get like stacks. It'd take 20 and then give them out to your students. He was doing this, dipping into his own pockets to make sure folks were getting this information and using hip hop the way it was intended to be used, as a carrier, as a vessel to carry revolutionary messages to lots and lots of youth, many of which are disenfranchised. So I met Jared through that, but then later on, Jared has started something called I Mix What I Like, right? I Mix What I Like, you know, borrowing from the late great Steve Biko, I write what I like. And so he continues to do this work. He also had a show on 89.3 FM in Washington, D.C., Jazz and Justice, and it was it on Wednesdays or no, Tuesdays? I can't remember.
Over the years, it was
all over the place. But he had, I mean, fantastic guests on, like really great guests on, engaging conversations. People would call in. They were encouraged to call in. It wasn't like these shows where you're not encouraged to come, whether you agree to disagree. They were encouraged to call in and engage with whoever the guests were encouraged to engage themselves with Dr. Ball. And now I Mix What I Like is just, it's grown by leaps and bounds. So now if you type in I Mix What I Like and go to YouTube, you'll see some really powerful shows with really powerful guests that he has on. Deep content, really great content. He's, I would say, he might not say it because, and I'll get to this part. He probably wouldn't say this, but I would say a critically acclaimed author. And the centerpiece of this discussion is going to be around his book, right? Which I think drew a lot of you in, the myth and propaganda of black buying power. And you're going to get into that. And it should draw you in. It should draw you in. Like, what are you talking about? We hear all the time, like, black folks got trillions of dollars to spend, and they spend it. So he's going to get into that. But he's one, and I'll say this, with the camera rolling, he's one of the few academics that I really feel comfortable talking to and talking about. There's a lot of academics that I definitely respect, but he's not he's not one of those that got his PhD so that he could walk around and you could call him doctor, right? He earned it. He got his, his academic bona fides and did the due diligence, did the work, went through the academic hazing and all that stuff and got his PhD. But you know what I'm talking about. This is the kind of person that you invite over your house. Some folks you invite over your house and they have books on coffee tables that they've never read before, just spread out so that they look smart. Jared, his brilliance speaks for itself. It absolutely speaks for itself. And he doesn't have to brag and boast, but he's that kind of academic. He's that kind of academic. I think it probably goes back to people that trained him like James Turner and so many others that he's been surrounded with that have left an indelible impact on him. And he's now, he's now putting his own imprint, all over the DMV, but quite frankly, all over the world. And so I'm really, really happy and pleased when I asked him, he said, yeah, let's do it. I mean, it was just a quick email. He said, yeah, let's do it. And he's like, I'd love to come on and embarrass my daughter. She's a student there, and have her come. It's an excuse for her to come in. But we're really, really pleased to have Dr. Ball, Jared. And Jared, I really thank you. And I mean everything I say about him. And I'm really excited for this, for those folks that are watching virtually and the folks that are here and the folks that will watch when we get this video uploaded, because the information is extremely, extremely important, especially if we're trying to move forward in a revolutionary direction, which I hope we all are. And if not, by the end of this lecture, I think you'll want to get on that pathway. So Dr. Ball, thanks.
Thank you, man.
All right.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
It's good to see all of you here, my daughter, of course, and thanks for joining us online. Yuri, Gus, good to see you as well. Thank you very much. So I'm just going to talk for, roughly 30 minutes or so, and then I look forward to having a discussion with everybody for really as long as you all want. It's an honor to be back in this space, and again, thank you, Solomon, and thanks to all of you for being here. Welcome to all those watching elsewhere, and to those who may see this in some other time and place, again, welcome. Speaking of other times and places, even those that have never quite existed, or in ways not as to be described here today. It was here years ago during my time as a doctoral student in the College of Journalism that I took advantage of a campus visit by the late, great legal scholar, Dr. Derek Bell. Who, among many other things, was, of course, one of the founders of critical race theory. See, not long before Bell's visit, the woman I would eventually marry, having met her right here on campus, gifted me a book titled Strangers and Neighbors, Relations Between Blacks and Jews in the United States. Knowing my mother is a white Jew and my father was a black man, this amazing Panamanian woman who would eventually humble me by accepting my hand in marriage, thought this book might mean something to me, and it has. I've been quoting it ever since. One of the several contradictions leading me to the topic today, and about which I wrote a small book, is that for most of my life I've heard variations of some flawed form of a question about why had not black people done what Jews have in overcoming past trauma? Why has not the black community unified and developed its own businesses, positions within the economy, or the achievement of a state itself, as had Jews? Usually the answers would revolve around some tired nonsense based in biblical mythology, the specialness of Jews going back to Moses, or about what was gained from their enslavement and lost in ours. But I've always on some level or another known better. The answers, as Malcolm X once summarized, are found with the analyses born of historical research and study. The answers can only come from the study of the science of society. Through the study of material conditions and the culture or worldview those conditions produce. So in that book, given me by my now wife of almost 21 and a half years, Derek Bell had written an essay in which he sought to carve a way through what remains, unfortunately, a variety of powerful narratives that operate to prevent people from reaching appropriate conclusions about our world. Conclusions that would demand a very different kind of behavior. Bell was describing an institutional relationship black people hold to this society, one governed or managed by public policy, which he described as follows. Quote, if the nation's policies towards blacks were revised to require weekly random roundups of several hundred blacks who were then taken to a secluded place and shot, that policy would be more dramatic, but hardly different in result than the policies now in effect, which most of us feel powerless to change. The day I read that, I said, damn. And every day, every time I read that, I say, damn. This legendary legal scholar, Harvard professor, who would one day join my radio show to talk about how I was largely right that his former student, Barack Obama, would misuse his biraciality, his blackness, to assuage a white ruling elite, while the settler colonial machine continues running us over. Bell, the giant of a man, who though somewhat like my wife, I look up to and honor, but have to look down to actually see, had really written these words about public policy and black people. Had he really done that? Just before his talk that day here on campus years ago, I ran up to him as he entered the auditorium, book in hand, asking not only for his signature, but his his in-person confirmation. He was on his way to give a great talk about his then new book, Silent Covenants, a talk where a kind, like I'm doing right now, in honor of him, he told an apocryphal story about a student office hours visit that became a brilliant exploration of critical race theory. The form of my presentation today is also largely apocryphal, though far less brilliant, but also beside the point. Because in that moment then, years ago, not far from right here, I needed to know from the man himself, did you actually write that? Did you actually say that public policy in this country functioned with the equivalence of random weekly massacres of black people? He looked up at me over his glasses and said, it's true, ain't it? And then slid coolly up to the podium. It was the intellectual equivalent of the answer Paul Pierce once gave a sideline reporter after he hit a game-winning bank shot. Paul, he was asked, did you call backboard? Paul looked at the man sideways as the crowd rushed the floor and he said, I called game, and walked off. Oh, my bad, excuse me, everybody. Sorry about that, this is really rude, forgive me. Sorry about that. Excuse me, everyone. I was just starting to cook too. I usually don't have my phone on during presentations. This is embarrassing. Yes. I'll hold for Mr. Perry. Sorry, everyone. This happens from time to time. Since the second edition of my book came out, it's caused a few ruffled feathers in big places. Yes, hello. I understand you didn't like the book chapter I co-wrote about your films, Tyler. No, I'm not calling you Mr. Perry. Yes, I know you're upset with the video FD Signifier just did where he shouts me out and facetiously suggests you are the exception to the rule of my buying power claim. Yes, you are super rich and bought land upon which you built a sprawling studio, but no, this is not black buying power. Or rather, this is the myth associated with the claim. Huh? Why? Because you claim you represent black excellence, and black excellence as individualist black capitalist success, dressed up as some collective victory. But you bought the land that the state of Georgia and the mayor of Atlanta had to approve, with money you made from white corporate investment in your productions, Lionsgate Films, distribution, Viacom, etc. And then you got Next Gen Capital investment supported you to, hello? Oh, my bad, sorry about that. Again, that was rude and I apologize. As I was saying, the point Bell, that is Dr. Derek Bell, made about the impact of public policy on black people has always stuck with me. So much so that as I would continue to work with grassroots political organizers, more deeply engage the black radical tradition, and learn more about our media environment, one constructed to quietly allow advertising dollars and the largest corporations spending them to essentially set the parameters or ranges of our thinking, I would routinely be confronted with this claim that we don't need radical ideas or political movements because if black people would improve their financial literacy and spend more wisely, their almost $2 trillion in buying power could be used to close the racial divide, racial wealth divide, rather. But how could Bell be right about public policy if everywhere I turned within black political spaces or media of any kind, across the political spectrum, I would hear this claim: trillions of dollars. Black people could circulate their dollar, invest in black businesses, black banks, land, and then we could buy our way into politics like the Jews. We could own our businesses like the Asians do in our communities. But then Bell would be wrong, because public policy, according to these claims, would not be necessary and therefore could not hurt us. If we just did these various black capitalist things, we could be good. The problem is, of course, that there is no land to buy. What is bought requires policy allotment and allowances. There is no stock to buy. It's already accumulated with more than 90% in the top 1%, all of which is protected by public policy, not some business genius among this or that group to the exclusion of black people alone. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Again, this is embarrassing. I apologize for this interruption. Yeah, Jay, I'm sorry, Sean. No, my guy, I'm not calling you Mr. Carter. I'm in the middle of something right now, and I've explained to you several times already why I wrote about you in my book. But while you are already interrupting me again, how did a verse you spit about being born the day the legendary Black Panther leader Fred Hampton was assassinated come out a year after I made that same point, but critically in my book? I thought we came from the same era. No biting, Jay. Huh? No, I know your catalog because up through the no. I know your catalog because up through the Black Album, I loved your music. But once you went from DJ Premier opening your albums to Justin Timberlake, I was done. Huh? Because you spread dangerous black capitalist logic in your music. Yes, you do. In the story of OJ, you made them seem like black people are poor because of financial illiteracy. And what's better than one black billionaire? No billionaires, period. Hello? Oh, my bad, sorry. This is how some things go sometimes. I'm sorry. It's embarrassing. I apologize again. I've begun to hear more and more from celebrities lately, Grammy Award winners, podcasters. Again, I'll try to make sure my phone is off and double check. I'm a little confused by the new technology. In fact, when you hear the words financial literacy, by the way, you should prepare yourself to be lied to. People are not poor because of their spending habits or lack of knowledge or mutual funds. This is exactly what the myth of black buying power and its associated myths of capitalism, circulating dollars, entrepreneurialism are meant to do. Blame the poor, the black poor especially, for their condition. Derek Bell was right about public policy. The so-called rule of law, it's better understood as the orderly protection of resource and labor exploitation. So I started looking into the claim about these trillions of dollars in buying power. Where does it come from? Is it true? The short answer is no. Buying power is a myth concocted by government and business officials, the largest advertising buyers, the black commercial press, weaponized by the capitalist elite and their political compradors. Between militarized government intelligence and the corporate world alone, there is no longer any meaningful difference between propaganda, public relations, advertising, marketing, mass communications, strategic communications, information warfare, psychological warfare, worldview warfare, full spectrum dominance, counterinsurgency, news, or my favorite, entertainment. All are euphemisms for one another. All use essentially the same tactics, born in the same institutions, the same models, the same research, all to do as the recently passed Michael Parenti wrote, invent reality. Nowadays, the buying power myth is supported by 3 major outlets, all of whom make enormous amounts of money spreading misinformation, which becomes disinformation in the hands of the aforementioned trifling and ignoble multi-racial cast of class warrior characters. The myth of black buying power itself comes at the tail end of a long process of trying to figure out how to make people work, use what they earn to buy products they do not own, and then do so without questioning why the wealth created from that exchange only ends up in one set of pockets, leading to a world where today we have 800 people in this country worth $6.2 trillion, and the top 1% more broadly in the US alone are now worth $50 trillion, actually more than that, with billions of other people living in what George Jackson described as brutal half-lives. And in my book, I do a fairly good job of quickly summarizing the history of the myth, the media environment in which it is now allowed to permeate some of its narrative history. That is, how did it emerge, go from one purpose to being weaponized against black people after World War II as the corporate world was, in their words, reconquering America, to when the myth was again weaponized further in the 1970s, took another sophisticated turn in the 1990s, and how black radicals have unwittingly participated in that process, and then how the myth operates today and is expanding in its particular form of structural violence against other groups, particularly Latinos. I'm sorry. Sí, pero estoy en medio de una conferencia. Sí. Sé que ahora dicen que los latinos tienen casi 4 billones de dólares en poder adquisitivo. No significa lo que crees que significa. Deja de escuchar Jay-Z. Deberías haber dicho no a la Super Bowl y decirle a la NFL que no actuarías donde agentes lunáticos de ICE estén secuestrando y matando gente. Hola? Bad Bunny? Oh, sorry about that. Yes, the myth is expanding and coming for Latinos too. I was just trying to tell Benito, sorry, he calls from time to time too, that a better protest of ICE would have been to not to perform at the Super Bowl at all, that Jay-Z was given a contract to book those performances to silence the protest of Colin Kaepernick, whose only mistake was doing that Nike commercial. Media scholar Marshall McLuhan was right about our media environment being what we consume and what consumes us. Let us quickly, before the phone rings again, let me close quickly before the phone rings again and conclude, as my book does, by focusing in a way like Derek Bell on public policy. Any overt public discussion of solutions has to confront the realities of electoral politics and move differently. Public policy and candidates, the parties, the blocs that produce them, have to address themselves first and foremost to public policy, law, regulation, all of which are designed to redistribute the tremendous wealth we all have created already by our consumption, which drives this country's economy at roughly 70%. Finally, just to wrap up and summarize what the myth of black buying power is. First, it's an attempt to manage the contradiction between profit and labor with the goal of suppressing militant tendencies among the oppressed. Secondly, it's an attempt to measure the ability of any particular group to enrich the owners of the economy. Third, it's an attempt to determine advertising revenue expenditures for business. Oh my goodness, this is terrible. Again, I really do apologize. I'm sorry about this. B. Mitch, this is perfect timing. B. Doyle Mitchell, this timing is crazy. But it's bad. And you had your chance already, remember? Yeah. As the CEO of Industrial Bank, one of the largest black banks here in the country, we debated all this on WPFW 89.3 FM Jazz and Justice Radio, remember? Yeah, in fact, I'm about to wrap up my presentation by explaining what you did not understand yourself as the head of a whole bank. No, buying power is not GDP, and gross domestic product is not a measurement of a people's wealth or economic strength. It's a measurement of the wealth we all create for those who own the economy. I feel like you should have, hello? Again, I will do better this time with technology. No, the myth of black buying power is not a measure of income. It is not a measure of wealth. It is not GDP as it's often compared to. It is not a pool of money that can be used as any community would want. What is needed, what black people need and other people need is political power, or as once was said, all power to the people. I'm more happy to elaborate on any of this and to not and to not take this group call I see coming in from Boyce Watkins and Spike Lee. I prefer some form of dialogue anyway, and would love to hear your questions, comments, queries, conundrums, catechisms, concerns, cacophony, calumny, consternation, contemplation, condemnation, consternation, dare I say confrontation. But no, thank you very much, and we can move on to Q&A. Thank you. So do any of you have any comments or questions or queries, conundrums? There's a lot I summarized or tried to, because I do prefer to get to this point yeah.
Do you have any copies available for purchase now?
No, unfortunately I don't. The good news is
Okay.
you can go to imixwhatilike.org and you can follow the easily seen prompts there to get a free copy of the first edition in PDF form. But unfortunately, I've run out and don't have any more to carry with me. So,
Jared, I have this question.
Sure.
So where does this come from? Because we've heard this over and over again, and even from, I guess, well-intended folks sometimes, like, oh, if we just spend our money better, like,
Yeah.
like our problem is that we buy too many sneakers, and we've got well over $1 trillion of discretionary income that we're spending, and when we just don't spend it wisely, like our white counterparts. Like, where does this come from, and is there some context to that?
Yeah, there's a lot of context. I mean, again, fortunately, I do these presentations a lot, and I'm constantly trying to find new ways of conveying and getting into the discussion. And sometimes the context can get cavernous, can become convoluted. But in short, the numbers come from nothing. And what I started doing that very few people do is just look at the citations whenever that claim is made, and then what they'll see are two things. One, there are often no citations at all. Or two, they all refer back to one of three sources. Usually it's the Selig Center, also in Georgia, the Selig Center for Economic Growth, who says in their materials, their information materials, that their express purpose is to produce information that helps Georgia's businesses allot their advertising revenue. Nowhere in there is it saying, hey, we're doing this to help black people understand their relationship to the economy and how powerful or not they actually are. So then I started to, well then, how are they coming up with the number? And they come up with the number in a very spurious and ultimately empty kind of way. First of all, as they say in their own literature, these are estimates and projections. We can't even determine what buying power really is. No economist refers to buying power. There are no economists who, in fact, they say there's no actual way to assess how every particular segment of society spends its money. So what they do is they take survey data of some consumer reports about how they went shopping during the holiday season, and then they extrapolate from that, and they say, well, it looks like black women are spending this amount of money on hair care products. So if you have hair care products targeting black women, you should maybe determine to spend this much of your ad revenue, blah, 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 blah. So they come from nothing. In their earliest origin, which are out of the turn of the 20th century consumer survey reports, the goal was it was based on how much are all of these groups earning. And then the goal was to assess how much of all that they earn can we, the corporate world, get back. So, and again, with measurements, because they were trying to suppress labor uprisings and strikes and all this other stuff. So we're trying to say, again, we need to pay people enough to live and then to shop, but not enough that they don't need to go back to work the next day. And not too little that they don't want to go to work because they're now ready to go on strike and rebel and do all this other kind of stuff. So they're trying to find, I always try to equate it to when they talk about, you know, sugar and sodas and stuff, the bliss point, the exact amount of sugar to put in, so it's not too much and too little, but exactly enough to blow your taste buds up and addict us all. That's what they're trying to do with that, with those. So the reports are all trying to help the government and the corporate elite determine how do we manage people's wages so they don't rebel. That was ultimately, then it eventually turned into a subset of a broader project, again, of the corporate world after the Second World War, trying to reorganize people's mindsets away from how the state can actually take care of people, because during the war, the government made sure everybody had jobs and everybody was paid right, and the labor was distributed properly. Then after the war, the corporate world was like, you know, damn that, we got to get back on free market, you know, fundamentalism, and the private industry can solve everything, and get government out of here. So everything that was associated with government was demonized as communism, and everything that was, you know, associated with freedom was propagandized as capitalism and American democracy. And as a subset of that, the burgeoning black bourgeoisie that was emerging in the 1950s said, you know, with John H. Johnson leading the way, said, you know, we don't want to struggle politically. We want to do the business thing. I have a media empire. I need ad revenue. The black community, which is the buying power problem, does not make enough money to spend on my media to make me rich enough and big enough to be what I want to be. So I need white corporate ad revenue. To get white corporate ad revenue, that I'm targeting a community that is not rebellious, is wanting to be middle class, will pay its bills. He created The Secret of the Selling the Negro documentary in 1954 to promote, in conjunction with the Secretary of Commerce and, you know, the other industry, to promote this idea, to say to the white corporate world, you have all this ad revenue. Spend it with me, and I will sell you a black audience that will buy your products. Excuse me. And that's the model that permeates to this day. And this is why so many in the black commercial media space have, you know, well, in some cases, I've, you know, had some struggles with them personally, but they've promoted this mythology because they're trying to attract ad revenue that they desperately need to survive as a commercial press, and to ascend into the fantasies of the middle class. And then, you know, but unfortunately the black community as a result ends up being confused into thinking that the poverty that exists is the result of bad spending habits. And historically, this has been picked up by the entire political spectrum of the black community. So at one point, Malcolm X bought into it, Dr. King bought into it. This moment that I think is funny is that Du Bois and Garvey, for all the beef that they had, at one point they were in agreement over this, and Garvey even made a joke in his press about, you know, Du Bois finally realized what, you know, the buying power I've been saying we had. And they were both misunderstanding what that buying power meant. Because again, you can't, it's not just this pool of money that black people could spend in any way that they want, with the impact that is mythologized it will have. You know, so I mean, there's a lot more. I mean, I could keep going. You know, it's really is plugged into all this other propaganda and psychological warfare about trying to convince people. You know, in the 70s, Richard Nixon said, you want to redefine black power away from the radicals like Kwame Ture and redefine it on the standards of black capitalism and business. So he started to promote this idea that, and he would use advertising and some silly, you know, unfortunate friendship and relationship with artists like James Brown to promote this idea that black people don't want revolution, they just want an opportunity. And given the opportunity, they can, you know, on this equal footing, they can do everything that the white man can do. And then, of course, they leave out the fact that even in white America, there's a huge class problem. And I often think it's funny that the greatest, most famous, internationally known critic of capitalism the world has ever known was a white Jew from Europe.
Marx, yeah.
Marx.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's like, and his Gentile, rich, mercantile partner Engels.
Yeah.
Like it's these two white men from Europe who are saying, no, capitalism, even outside of a context of white supremacy and colonialism and this, that, and the third, and all the abuse that black and brown people suffer and indigenous people suffer, before we even get to that, capitalism is a monstrous entity that destroys lives and destroys opportunity and creates all this inequality. Then you add this race thing to it, and then we have a whole new level or series of levels of problems. So that part keeps getting left out, and then there's this whole history that I do try to draw some quick lines to show that all of the critics of this process that have existed, because I'm not really saying anything new, it's just that all of these critics that have existed have been marginalized and suppressed and moved to the side in a really systemic way that plays out systematically to make sure that what we get, we were just talking about this yesterday, that what we get is Rachel Maddow going on MSNBC and saying the most important black intellectual is Henry Louis Gates, who is the most conservative, right-wing, backwards thinking problem in black intellectualism as far as I can concern. But that's what we get, and all those that he has been explicitly hostile to in his career, Kwame Ture, Malcolm X, the radical Dr. King, the Black Power movement, all of those ideas, and all of certainly the communists and the socialists and the Marxists, all of those, and the labor movement, all of those ideas get completely washed away as we get this constant fantasy of black capitalist entrepreneurial success and fantasy. And then if you look at the data, black wealth is headed to zero. The Laura DeRennecourt paper, I know I'm not saying her name properly, but that paper that the world should be forced to focus on proves that black people cannot catch up to white people in terms of wealth parity. She demonstrates the data that because of the starting point of enslavement, there cannot be parity reached. So all of the ideas around we can entrepreneur our way, we can vote blindly for candidates that are handed to us our way out of this, all of that is part of the mythology that is quite by design meant to keep us from doing what we should be doing.
Appreciate it. Appreciate it. Any other questions?
Hey, can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
Hey, first off, how you doing? My name is Muhammad. I really appreciate the lecture. My question is, so you talk a lot about psychological warfare, and I guess as like, my question is, as a young person, like I'm curious about like Jay-Z, like think Kendrick Lamar, think like Bad Bunny, you know, like what direction would you point like a young person who wants to like deconstruct these ideals, or like I'm really interested in the psychological aspect of it. Like could you maybe elaborate on the role somebody like Jay-Z plays and what Kendrick Lamar's like Super Bowl performance represents, and how like young people like fall into these ideologies and like the different traps and stuff like that?
Well, sure. On some level, so first of all, what I usually, and what I've forgotten to say today, is that I don't want any of the shortcomings of this presentation to stop you from not taking my word for any of this and challenging you to investigate further what my claims are, the histories, the literature, etc. On the one hand, if you look at the context of the rise, what I learned right here in the College of Journalism, the history of mass communications is very clear in this country that overly simplified, the ruling elite need public opinion to be shaped in a certain way. That's the only hope they have in managing this wild inequality that we deal with. So tremendous amounts of research and effort are always going into how is popular culture, popular narratives, and popular opinion shaped so that our behavior can be managed within acceptable ranges of behavior. So within that context, what I had just started doing years ago was, and I encourage you to follow a similar method. Take whatever artist you're talking about, Jay-Z in this example, and in fact start with artists you like, which is what I did with Jay-Z as the example years ago, because we should always be asking, how do we know what we know, and why do we like what we like? Start with an artist you like, as I said with Jay-Z, and look at the corporate relationships they have just as a starting point. What label are they signed to? And on Wikipedia, you can just go to the right-hand column of the artist and you see the labels. And then when you click those labels, click again and see where they are by their parent group. And what you end up seeing is, at this point, we have a situation where almost all of the top streamed and sold artists of all genres are coming from Universal, Sony, or Warner music groups, who have incestuous relationship deals with Spotify, Google, and Apple Music as the dominant distributive platforms, who have now added to that incestuous relationships with these AI music companies, creating situations where they will be able to copy the music of mostly dead and unsigned and poor artists, mimic that art, resell it through spins to us and to each other, and generate tremendous amounts of wealth for themselves, giving us only what they want us to get, with none of us being involved. And I'm laughing, but that's terrifying and spooky. All right, all that is done because what the end goal is who initially is targeting 12 to 18-year-olds and who has their attention. And what we end up seeing is that, obviously, overwhelmingly, that's determined by a handful of companies, managed by mostly a handful of wealthy white men who are mostly in their 40s to 60s and sometimes 80s and up. All to produce a popular media environment, a popular intellectual narrative environment that limits, again, what we think about and then what we might think we might do about it, or that we might not think that there's anything to be done. But lastly, and then I'm happy to have any follow-up, we don't need to speculate to the extent that these Epstein file releases are accurate. And we saw the Jess Staley email, the elite billionaire financier, capitalist, who said to Epstein, he said, why is the United States not Sao Paulo having the uprisings they were having in the favelas during I think the 2014 World Cup? He said, why isn't the United States suffering like this? He said, because of Jay-Z. He said they've been bought off by Jay-Z. All of the people, he said, that should be out in the streets protesting, whatever their concerns are paying attention to Jay-Z. So, from their perspective, that's the role psychologically that Jay-Z and others are meant to play. And then if you look politically, as I was trying to allude to in my little silly skit, is that Jay-Z comes in politically to gentrify Brooklyn, claiming he's got black excellence and ownership with less than 1% of the Brooklyn Nets. Then he says he's going to do the same thing with a casino, and then loses again to Nas, who has his own unfortunate incestuous relationship with these companies. And then what does Jay-Z say with the NFL when Colin Kaepernick is leading a protest and a threat to the NFL's bottom line and to player engagement and fan support? Because I certainly haven't watched the game since then. Jay-Z said we're past the era of kneeling. And he cuts a deal with Roger Goodell of the NFL, gets a $20 million contract with Rock Nation to give us the Super Bowl performances that we get every year. And that's it. And Colin Kaepernick disappears. Jay-Z's still on top. And we're rocking to a very good Bad Bunny performance, but that one that completely undermines all his previous criticisms of ICE and everything else that's happening here. So Anyway, I hope I've addressed somewhat your question, but that's yeah.
Oh yeah, that was great. And I also just wanted to follow up and say, I think I noticed, like, I feel like I remember when Colin Kaepernick did the kneel, and I just feel like it's so crazy how people have done like a complete 180 in the sense of like, you know, all it takes is to like, I can clearly see that, you know, something is going on behind the scenes because the Colin Kaepernick stuff just kind of disappeared, you know, completely. And people forget this is the same NFL that's doing this Bad Bunny stuff. I feel like, you know, it's right in front of our faces a lot of the time, but that's why I asked about the psychological warfare, because it has to be so extremely strong, because I feel like people were just willing to forget and, you know, pack up and forget about Colin Kaepernick, and he got done so dirty, you know, and it's just like the narrative just flipped on its head, you know, and I know Jay-Z has something to do with it, you know, like before I came here and before that, you know, before I even did any real research, I knew that it had to be something with Jay-Z, you know, if you're just paying attention. So I thank you, you know, for clarifying that, and I just wanted to bring that up as a point of discussion.
Well, really, if I mean, and because I know of his work more than I should, if you go back and look at Jay-Z's entire career, I mean, he's, you know, part of my argument around pop culture and hip hop in particular is that you know, the historical record's pretty clear. There's never been a situation where you've had someone who is both rich or all rich, famous, and radically political. This is and again, I defy anybody to show me even in one historical exemption from that. So so the point being that the pathway to celebrity and popularity in this country has always been a very meticulously curated and surveilled process. And if you look at Jay-Z's career, it's pretty obvious he's exactly what the ruling elite would want to promote. So his talent notwithstanding, this is someone who talks never-endingly about conspicuous consumption, drug dealing, violence against his own community, black capitalists. He even did a song with Nas when they reunited called "Black Republicans." I mean, you know, it's like so. I mean, it's and at the same time he does verses where he claims to be Fred Hampton and Che Guevara and all this other kind of it really is them playing in our faces. And he could only have his rise to prominence with the help of elite corporations. That's the case with really anyone. So they're not going to continue to fund and support his success if he's not doing what William Buckley said was the role of black capitalism to promote scattered success, to promote universal hope. Yeah, I don't know who.
Andre first, and then you're after Mr. Nottingham.
Very impressed, with the discussion of the contemporary issues and the dynamics at play, but I always try to challenge young folks to think historically.
Sure.
So looking at, the most valuable asset, land, black farmers, going from like 1910 to the present.
Yeah.
Black farmers owned about 16 to 19 million acres of land. And we're now to the point where we're under 5 million acres of land.
Yeah.
And then just the percentage of farmers, black farmers, to somewhere 9 to 10, 12%, down to less than 2%. So these are means of production when we're talking about wealth and wealth accumulation and things of that sort. So it's important for us to kind of think in that dynamic, in addition to what you all are discussing with these contemporary dynamics at play and these individuals and how they kind of shape the discussion of the black purchasing power.
That's a really good point. And so this speaks to a couple of things. One, one of the problems, of course, is that, as I think is still the case, there's 4 white men in this country that have more land than all of black America combined. And then a bigger problem that has really been crystallized for me more recently by my comrade, Two Black. He goes a poet, activist, artist named Two Black, a brilliant writer, co-author of Laundering Black Rage, a great book. But he'd written a piece recently titled something like "Nonviolence is Violence Too," and actually I might be conflating this with something else he wrote. But the point that I'm getting at is that he talked about the supply chain problem. So that even if you have black-owned land, you mentioned means of production, that's only part of it. The other part of the means of production are everything from the seed to the tractors to the trucks to whatever's going to, all of that is still owned by the same broader white corporate world. So again, part of the mythology that is imposed around entrepreneurialism and black capitalism, and I'm not saying you're doing it, I'm just saying is that once some business in and of itself is owned, that doesn't even begin to address the broader problem. And we're seeing it again with Uncle Nearest whiskey.
Yeah.
You know, that is promoted as this black woman-owned whiskey, and look under the hood, and she's still got to get white investment capital. The whiskey she's getting from the distillery is still the Tennessee Company distillery that serves Jack Daniels and I think everybody else. She still needs, you know, liquor stores to carry it. She still needs trucks to convey the bottles. You know, she still needs a broader system to get her to market, and then advertising and all the other kind of stuff. So it's not enough to just say, let's start a business. In fact, one of the favorite, I know this is now I'm going some, but this, one of the favorite stats that I've learned in this research is that I think from 1992 to 2012, black people had created more than 2 million businesses, but the capture of U.S. sales revenue went down and it's still only less than like 0.5%. And because those businesses are in a certain set of the economy, they're not, they depend on black people as customers, they don't have a lot of employees, they don't have a lot of investment capital. So there's all these other problems associated with these claims around what business is supposed to do. And that's why I keep saying, let's skip the $1 trillion myth and target through public policy that $20 trillion GDP that's created every year. And how in the hell does 1% of the country have twice now in wealth what this country produces in GDP, in $54 trillion? That is an absurdity that should be outlawed through legislation. And all of us should be in here, on our free education, with free health care, driving on well-paved roads with a already finished electric rail. Like, we should be chilling. Because that's the thing that really bothers me when I've invested, the more I pay attention to this, like, the data's clear. We create the wealth. Through the water bottle buying, all this technology, all this consumption, all the shopping, all the bill paying, we've created all this wealth. And then we're told that somehow we're financially illiterate and therefore deserve to be poor. I mean, that's just. And while I'm just saying, I'm sorry, one more thing. While I have any audience at all, the now just newly minted Dr. Erica Brown, who is a colleague of mine at Black Liberation Media, does this great, not only podcast called Brokish, but she's producing all this really important work around the history around financial literacy as a concept. And what she's showing is that it is, in my way of summarizing it, forgive me, it's a neo-colonial weapon to use, much like linguistically indigenous people were told, we're stealing your land and genociding you because you don't speak English, French, Spanish, whatever. You're illiterate linguistically, so therefore you deserve genocide. So we're told because you're financially illiterate, you deserve poverty. And it's the same narrative, and then the same logic around how do you define what is financial literacy. And it's being delivered all around the world and touted as a mechanism for governments and ruling elites to use to convey to their poor people, don't politically struggle, don't raise questions about the economy, just open up a savings account, just learn what a mutual fund is, start a business, and you'll be good. And it's all propaganda. It's all just propaganda. So, yes. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
No, I don't know where we are.
There was one guy on this.
Yuri.
From Belgium, or lives in Belgium. Yuri, go ahead.
Very
quickly, Jared, what would you say to members of the audience who would say that if we just owned the convenience stores like those racist Korean store merchants, if we were the ones in power, we would be very generous with the minimum wage, or the arguments for black capitalism in Canada is that we just need to subsidize the small business owners, the black small business owners, and it all will be hunky-dory. And then, and of course the other argument that if we just had a black Wall Street like in Oklahoma before the racist pogroms, all would be hunky-dory. What would you say to folks, many of them even left-leaning, who would say, who would use that as opposed to we have to work with indigenous, queer folks and Latinx folks and the whites left to wage revolution.
And good to see you, Yori, again.
Likewise.
So again, sort of what I was just saying a minute ago, a lot of what gets left out around these mythological claims around Black Wall Street is that broader supply chain network. First of all, the class element gets left out. I think like 95% of black people in Black Wall Street were just regular workers. They were selling their labor broke as everybody else. It was, and the handful of the black capitalist bourgeoisie that was doing okay still were dependent on the broader oil economy of the state and the region. They were still dependent on all the other broader aspects of the economy. The other thing that gets left out, of course, is that when Black Wall Street was burned down by white vigilante terrorists, black people rebuilt it. It got even bigger and stronger, but the real terrorism of federal policy came in and wiped it out by running highways and all that other kind of stuff, and broke it all up. So again, to my point about public policy, and that's why I keep saying, like, stop making I want us all to stop telling ourselves and each other that we just need one more business venture and we'll be okay. And when we need political power, however, I do like the Panther definition, power is the ability to define phenomena and have it act in a desired manner. But however we would define, but political power, the ability to set policy that serves the needs of a majority of the people. That's what we need to be focused on. So I think I'm forgetting another aspect of your question, but the class element.
There's also the people who say that if we were the ones that owned the convenience stores, we would be very generous with our mostly black employees. But it's Koreans or whatever that keep getting those jobs.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm doing. I want to just again invite people to tap in. I'm doing this project with Sudeep Bhattacharya. We call it the Donut King Project, which is an exploration into these claims about Black and Asian economics. And the Donut King was a somewhat popular documentary and a book that claims that Cambodians come over here and do what black people can't do, and they set up this donut empire, and if how great America is that you could come here from Cambodia and become a millionaire setting up a donut empire. Why don't black people basically do the same thing is the argument, and all of it leaves out all kinds of things in terms of public policy and class. And then even, again, just start with the simple question, well, what does the corner store do for that community who owns it? So it's, the one that, the corner store that even we had in the tree-lined streets near where we used to live, you walk over there and it's literally the same 5 or 6 East Asian people in there, all day, every day, whenever you go in there, and how much wealth is being extracted out of a poor community. Why are they there in the first place? It has a history of public policy where to come here as a Chinese, for instance, immigrant, you could only get here if you owned a business. And where are you going to put those businesses? White folks were going to have, you're not going to put the Chinese, the yellow scare and all, you're not going to put them in the white community, so where did they get put? So, and again, how much wealth is being extracted that is doing what for those communities? So yes, if they were black owned, it's wonderful. I love being at Morgan State all day, and all I see are black people. It's wonderful, beautiful, and it's all great and good. And yet, there's a massive class dynamic problem there as well. Massive maldistribution of goods and services and wealth. And at the end of the day, as beautiful as black people are to look at, I don't want to look at one with their boot on my neck who's telling me, don't be mad at the boot because it's black. So, as Abram Harris said almost 100 years ago when he was looking into this, his research is often ignored, he said the biggest, and I don't agree with him here, but he said when you look at this operation, the claims around circulating dollars in black business, he said the only people who benefit are the black business community. And he said that they were the biggest exploiters of the black community, and I wouldn't go that far. But I understand where he was coming from. So that's what I, again, class, that's why we need, there needs to be a class element to our struggle. And a better understanding of how the economy works. That's, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so, with financial literacy kind of like distorted in a way, like redefining it in a way of like perpetuating like the buying of like land and like maybe what industries such as like supply chain problems like that could be I feel like that might be incorporated into that to like perpetuate the wealth building of the people.
All right, so let me, if I understand you correctly, let me be a little more clear about what I'm saying about financial literacy. So, and I think I brushed over this. Financial literacy has its own dominant narrative claim. Mm-hmm. And it's promoted as this mechanism to teach mostly black and brown people that, to be more responsible.
Right.
Save your money, invest, understand what a mutual fund is, and all these other whatever. What I'm saying is that is a myth. That it's been designed to make sure that poor people never get anywhere, but also never become more politically radical. So what I would prefer, and have even tried to make it, that real financial literacy is political power. Right. That what financial literacy should be doing is teaching people how the economy works. How does capitalism work? How does it actually exploit and extract and disable and do all the things that it does, right, so that with that understanding, people would be more educated and prepared to mobilize to replace it, destroy it, advance from it. So that's what so what I'm saying is there is no, for the community as a whole, there is no land buying pathway, there is no banking, investment, savings account, house flipping, investment in crypto, which came up over the last few years as a big and specifically targeted black investors, unfortunately, which is terrible. Please avoid it. And although this is not investment, this is not financial advice. All of those things will not serve the actual entire community. At best, you get a handful of black people that do relatively well, and then they're constantly paraded in our face as a success that we should look to emulate, and that's part of and that's why William Buckley said that line. He said, "Scattered success breeds universal hope." That's what they're doing intentionally. Let a few people succeed, and then it's, we're supposed to, oh, I can do that too, so therefore we're not going to do this. Yeah. And this should be a whole bunch of radical forms of organizing and all kinds of other stuff. Yeah. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Yes.
Yeah, I'm curious of whether or not you're going to be bringing in kind of what's been coming out with the AI and the algorithms into your analysis.
Yes.
This morning, I ended up, it popped up on my feed, More Perfect Union, which I think is absolutely awesome. In addition to I Mix What I Like and stuff, is an excellent platform on YouTube. But it popped up about, we had 400 people shop for groceries. What we found will shock you. So they ended up having 400 people go into different Safeway, Giant, different stuff, and shop at the very same time, and they all got different prices. And so again, to this piece about how we're not going to be able to budget our way out of it, they're also upping the price depending upon the phone that you have as well too. And so recognizing that avenue, especially because like in the midst of like the aspiration, the cognitive dissonance, right, with the myths that people are dealing with right now, hot topic, AI, so everybody's kind of paying attention to it. I wanted just to encourage you to check that, like if there's a way to kind of incorporate it in, it may also kind of help amplify the discussion, right? Because unfortunately, those myths are definitely creating cognitive dissonance where people don't want to deal with the realities, and then also in the absence of having access to this information about the past and all of the mischievous and devious, insidious ways that things have come about.
No, it's a great point, and it's not in the buying power book work, but in terms of some of the broader media work that I and my comrades have been involved in, we've been dealing somewhat a lot with this AI thing. So the way I approach it is, similar with the crypto. It's even similar with the economy. Like, I am not a trained economist. I am not a tech genius in AI. I am not, I think the crypto world is a bunch of fake. I'm not a fake hustler either. So I'm not in these spaces like that. What I do, coming out of my particular, radical wing of Africana and media studies, is apply a certain methodology that starts with where does the wealth that gets created end up. That's almost always the way. This is a simple, and the way, and from whether it's AI, crypto, the regular capitalist economy, there's always this same level of accumulation. The AI thing is very similar. So I've been, Dwayne Monroe and other comrades of ours have really been looking into this. The short of it is AI is more or less a silly evolution of already existing technology that investors, kind of like crypto, have turned into this big narrative hot topic because they've needed to create a bubble to get everybody else to invest in something that's really not helpful and definitely not doing all that they even say it's going to do. So what we end up getting with is a lot of the same narrative. Black people, just as you should have and could have previously bought land, you should now buy space in the crypto, blockchain, metasphere, whatever, and they've literally been described as land in this, this digital land. And then we're told get in on the ground floor of AI technology, because once you own the technology. But shout out to the late great Catherine McAdams, who gave me Harold Innis's book, The Bias of Communication, right up the street here. Technology does not change social relationships. It enhances them. So this idea that people who are already in hostile relationships, now we're going to drop some blockchain, now we're going to drop some AI, and now black people can be free. It's like all the historic movements. If Dr. King had blockchain, it's so silly on that level. Then it does take other levels of expertise beyond my own to get to the nitty gritty. But when I've looked at the AI economy, it is an incestuous thing. NVIDIA sells its thing to this group, and then this group uses its thing to buy NVIDIA stock that then sells it back to this one. And they're all just passing the money around. Yeah. And when I look at the other dude, I look at Michael Burry, who was the one from The Big Short who predicted the collapse of Wall Street in 2008, the not a radical, but just a really focused stock market guy. He said the same thing here. AI is a bubble. He said why? Because just like in 2008, this one is using this to pay this one, to undermine this one, this one, this one. Nothing's being created. Nothing's being served. Nobody's subscribing. People don't need this. People are not spending all. You might do ChatGPT for free to have some fun, but nobody's talking about I'm about to become $100 a month subscriber so I can get the blah, 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 blah. And it's like they're not making any money. Grok with Elon Musk, that's not making any money. So he's got to come up with this whole new other thing. So in other words, I'll stop here with what you said at the end of your question. it's a hot topic because it's been imposed on us as a dominant narrative, so that we are distracted and think of this as a pathway that is not. And it's just, so in that way, it is just like what I'm saying about buying power.
America.
And, okay, yeah.
Okay, so I liked how you were kind of just like breaking down Jay-Z, but how would you do that for like Beyonce? That's kind of what I'm curious about, especially
I don't mess with her.
with her
I don't mess
recent
with her. I
tour.
like Beyonce.
How like she has so she two of her businesses, the whiskey and like the sacred hair, they were like sponsors of the tour, so she was kind of like recycling her money in. But I just curious like what you would say.
So
to
seriously, I
Beyonce.
did, so the late, you know, when she did that Super Bowl performance some years ago with,
Yeah.
the afro and the Panther thing and all that.
Yeah,
And
formation.
one time, I went on Twitter and I put a picture of Assata Shakur, who is unfortunately now deceased, the late great revolutionary Black Panther superhero. And I put a picture of her next to Beyonce. And I just said, if Beyonce is a revolutionary, what is she? And I have never, I get, you know, every once in a while, 2-3 likes, little retweet here and there. It was a barrage of virulently hostile, and it was, and people were literally telling me, I don't care who, they literally said, one of the ones I remember is like, who is this Assata woman?
Yeah, oh my gosh.
And I was like, this is the woman your superheroes trying to emulate and negate. But this one gets a $2 million bounty on her head that a black president with a black head of the FBI with a black attorney general all said was okay. And this one gets a $50 million Pepsi tour. So again, before we get into any sort of high elevated analysis, I'm like, what? This one is wanted dead or alive, and this one is, you will be made to want her whether you are dead or alive. You know what I'm saying? Like you gonna like Beyonce, you gonna know who Beyonce is.
You got stung by the beehive.
Oh my, I got destroyed by it. It was crazy, it was intimidating, and to be all perfectly honest, because I made the same point in a presentation among black youth in Baltimore, and it literally led to a fight. Somebody who decided to defend my argument had to defend herself out in the hallway.
Jeez.
And I was like,
wow.
If this isn't the counterintelligence program that I was claiming, like I was like, this is the proof, right? You know. But what I would say is, again, especially if you like Beyonce, she's the perfect example. Like, aside from what her talent is, how can she possibly have become popular and sustain that popularity without the investment of the most elite corporations? So even if you like her, and I'm not saying don't, please don't, I'm never.
I mean,
but what I am saying is why do you like her? And then why do they also like her? Because as I've said before, there is no historical exception to my rule, or whatever you want to call it, that you cannot be rich, famous, and politically radical. Every single person that has achieved the attempted, all three, has had their career, life, or something go very wrong very quickly. So, that's how I would at least start.
okay. Yeah, I think her like proximity to Jay-Z is kind of like safe, because I remember like after that Super Bowl performance, like so many people were mad because that was kind of the thing where it seemed like, oh, Beyonce is actually black. Because like, for example, like there were like police officers, like a whole list all over the country kind of like boycotting her. Because prior I feel like everyone loved her, like the single ladies Beyonce, that was everyone's like favorite, especially like the white women in their Pilates and business classes. But then after I feel like maybe one could say she's quietly radical, like in the music and the lyrics, and like especially with the trilogy that she's doing, like What You Can Pull. I don't know.
Honestly, I don't listen to her
I would
closely
say
enough to
quietly
make that
radical. Like on her
assessment.
tour, she had like the revolution will not be televised, but I feel like she does it quietly, but it's not. Like you have to like know to like.
So
at least from you have to have the context to get what she's saying from the art. But if you don't have it, you don't.
So the only way, so part of what I alluded to
Yeah.
in my remarks is that is The only way that I've been able to reach the conclusions I've reached is because of the particular sustained study of what the infrastructure of the society intends to produce. So when the U.S. Army Manual on Psychological Warfare says that the target population's cultural signs and symbols must be manipulated, that's somewhat of what I'm thinking about here. Of course, black people, all people want to see themselves reflected. Black people want to, everybody wants to see themselves reflected. Everybody wants to see them, everybody wants to see beautiful, talented people performing and doing things we can't do, or we wish we could do. It's all that. So then, what do the elite do? They say, "Nah, we get it. We're just gonna manipulate that by just simply only signing and allowing to flourish those who perform a certain politics, and everyone else just is just moved out. So that's really, again, I don't know, we don't have the time. It would just take at least me a lot longer to try to make it more plain than that. But I would just invite you to again, ask yourself, how do you know what you know? Why do you like what you like? Maybe involve as some course of study for the rest of your life, the focus on the politics of popular culture. This is a battleground from the perspective of the ruling elite. They are not, and they say this is what I'm saying, like that was the beauty of the privilege of the study I did here, is that I got to just see from their own literature what they have had to say about mass communication, propaganda, psychological warfare. What did they put in their manuals and documents in the books about them today? And they can't stop snitching on themselves. Yeah,
I have a question about, I don't know if you already talked about this, but I just got here, but what do you think constitutes like black financial freedom? Because I feel like, I talked about this in my public policy class, we were like, what does freedom look like to you? And for me, my first thought was, well, being able to do the things like that I need to do and also the things that I want to do. But then my professor had also asked like, it depends on like the value that we put like in money itself and like how we use it to get around and like the idea of trade and things like that. So what do you think financial freedom would look like, and if it even is like a concept worth like discussing?
To me, financial freedom is part of the mythology I want us to get away from. We need human freedom, we need political freedom, we need social freedom. Financially, there is no, Marissa Baradaran has this line in one of her books where she says, you can segregate people, but you cannot segregate money. And this is part of the mythology around the fantasy that black people had it better when black people were segregated. And part of her point was that ignores what was the relationship of that segregated community to the broader global even economy. We are all connected, whether we are aware of it or not. What happens to a worker in Ghana affects us here. What happens to a worker in Panama affects us here, and vice versa. So what financial freedom looks like to me for real is when we're all free and we all have access to the resources we need, where the wealth we're all creating is redistributed so there's no wild inequality, where my neighbor, even the ones I don't like, have the basics of what they need. Why? Because then they don't mess with me. I mean, it's that simple. Like, don't knock on my door, because you have all your health care and all your free school, and you got good clothing. What are you knocking on my door for? Because I really don't want you to. No, but that's what but the part of the hustle is to get each an individual person and group to pursue financial freedom. And in that individual or small collective pursuit, we do untold damage to ourselves and everybody else. And it's the essential selfishness of survival. I need you to be okay so that I'm okay. It's not some, I love you, that's all okay. It's that I need you to be okay so that I'm okay, and vice versa. That's how I think we should be looking at it. Yeah.
I was curious about how do you feel we as a people move towards that? I think that my grandfather often, particularly from the generation he comes from, his idea of moving towards freedom is that of financial freedom, is that of house flipping, is that of, oh, we all need to, you know, pull your pants up, let's make a business, things like that. And I think that when I've tried to have conversations with him around the flaws, in my opinion, of that, I think sometimes my word might hold a little less weight, seeing as I'm significantly younger than him, and I'm his grandchild.
That really don't matter, yeah.
And just don't have that experience.
Yeah, no, I mean, sometimes I actually, because I'm confronted with this a lot, and I sometimes just joke, you know, like, which enslaved African got snatched up because their pants were sagging?
Yeah.
Like, who, you know, like, who got dragged across the continent because they didn't speak the English language properly? Like, in other words, the suffering is the result of the suffering. It's not, you know, people didn't bring on the suffering because of some natural inherent flaw, some cultural shortcoming. So, one of my favorite people sitting right behind you is a great organizer.
That's right.
Brother Netford Freeman, and that's what we need. We need organizing. We need to be joining organizations, supporting organizations, building within those organizations, because that's where all the real solutions will come from. And they'll also give you talking points to bring back to your grandpa and all of that, and then and everything in between. But that's anyway. That's the part of what I've tried to do, even with this little book, is to try to explain to myself how the argument that I was getting confronted with all the time, everywhere, came to be. Where is everybody getting this from? Why is it when I'm sitting with the most militantly radical folks who wouldn't even be in a room with a camera or a phone, or to the people who can't stay away from a camera and a phone, all of them have this same thread of an argument. Where is it coming from? And nobody had an answer. So the only thing that I find kind of remarkable in this book project is that nobody actually lifted the hood and said, where's the source? And then, long story short, again, the source comes back to keeping us from having that conversation and being encouraged in those directions. So,
Jared, if you could kind of shed some light on something you said when we did our interview, and I asked you a solution, like how would you see, for instance, you know, you talked about folks in McDonald's, working McDonald's, and how the wealth is redistributed, how you would like to see the wealth redistributed. Like I think we talked about, like if a hot dog costs like $20 at a ball game, you know, 18 of that dollars or 19 of those dollars usually go to the owners. And you talked about how you would like to see things, like how ideally you would like to see things in terms of wealth redistribution amongst workers. Well,
everybody just has to go watch the interviews. I have maybe a vague memory of what I might have said, but essentially just that.
You talk about like working, you know, as opposed to several days a week, maybe 3-4 days.
Yeah. So, well, one thing I had just seen this what I thought was a fascinating video about the history of the pricing of hot dogs at these stadiums, and there was this white guy in, I think, San Francisco, who had this whole campaign in the '70s, which predicted where we are today. And he had this whole thing, and he was showing how he broke down with meticulous detail how the hot dog was still only costing them the same 2 cents to make, but the price every year kept going up and going up. And obviously the point was, it just kept going to the same handful of owners in the stadiums that were making all the money. So that's why the $20 hot dog today, I think, only costs them like $1, you know, something like that. So that's why I'm saying we are producing the wealth. We showed up at the game. We bought the hot dog. The problem is the wealth went to the. I was with I don't know if Marley remembers. I don't know if you remember. Anyway, yeah, we went to. We were at one of these sporting goods stores. We were buying all this expensive stuff for soccer, which I know you know about.
Yeah.
And the person behind the counter innocently just said, would you like to add a little bit for cancer or whatever, whatever? And I was like, no. And then there's that look, everybody has that look of, oh, he's so, and my whole point is, Dick's Sporting Goods is a multi-billion-dollar store. Why are you asking me? You give all, I've already created the wealth for you. Why am I being shamed into coming up with yet another? So that's really what I'm trying to say. Like I think what I was just trying to say that if that wealth was not going to the 1% of the people who are now worth $50-some trillion, then we would have a situation where, yeah, you might have to work at McDonald's, that might be your job, but you're only working 2 hours a day, 3 days a week for twice the salary, 10 times the benefits, you're going to the Riviera on vacation,
Yeah.
whatever you want to, you're doing all that, and then yeah, a couple hours a week you got to go flip burgers.
Yeah.
But you're not worried about your health care, you're not worried about your kids, you're not worried about everybody's everywhere, and then at the end of the day, we go to McDonald's, you get a better burger, the person's not miserable serving you, the person's not doing what I was doing when I was put on the drive-thru at Wendy's. I was hustling. People were getting ripped off left and right because I was like, I gotta work here all day and I walk home with nothing. I was scamming, I was doing all kinds of stuff. So I'm like, but why? Because I figured out I didn't have all the theory yet, but it was clear. Like I'm working way too hard for nothing. Somebody and Wendy is up here chilling.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's part of what I'm saying is, Fanon has this great line in Wretched the Earth where he says, something to the effect that the goal of the colonizer is to destroy the dreams of the colonized, and the goal of the colonized should be to dream of every method possible destroying the colonized, something like that. And the point is, even our dreams are, I think that's why, isn't that why Robert Kelly wrote Freedom Dreams? Anyway, our dreams are being suppressed. So we don't even dream right. We don't even think politically of what we should be going for. We're forced to think of the most narrow and small little thing instead of something like what we really could be. And that's again what Marx showed in The Contradiction. Capitalism shows us we have the world, we can produce everything that everybody needs. Now we just need to redistribute.
So we need consumers. You talked about that.
Consumers should be valued. That's right. This
Yeah.
is a 70% consumer economy. That's why I'm saying, stop telling me, yeah, exactly. Stop telling me to not spend, whatever on instead of telling, we should. Listen, I was raised in a labor movement household, and one of the things of the old labor movement was that the American consumer should want to pay more, should be honored to pay more, because that means that the worker is getting a better wage, that the world is getting, and the point is that and then if we had a socialist economy or something even approaching it, then the spending would be redistributed in such a way you'd be like, yeah, I spent $30 on a cup of coffee. But that's why we're all going to school for free, and that's why everybody has a job and health care, and nobody is struggling, and everybody has a good home, and everybody has, again, good working. Like, that should be the point.
Yes.
Don't tell me not to shop. Don't tell, and then it starts very simply. If you don't go and get your hair done and your nails done and buy the coffee, then the people who work there don't have jobs. Then they don't have an ability to pay the bills. Then that. So we should be. So absolutely, we should be happy to be out here. Like, absolutely, I'm spending money. And it should be like TV shows praising. Look at everybody spending money today. Look at Jimmy spend $400 on shoes. Thank you, Jimmy.
What's up?
Go ahead, Brother Sabir.
I appreciate you being here and look what I'm hearing here. The Buy Black campaign is a long-standing economic empowerment movement going back to the 1900s with Booker T, Marcus Garvey. Then you mentioned the Black Wall Street era, the early 1900s, where I guess during the Depression or something, where the statement was, "Don't buy when you can't work." Also the civil rights era, the Montgomery bus boycott, and subsequent movements like this. Farrakhan had power. People organized to work for economic, whatever he had years ago. So are you saying to me, historically, that they had it wrong? Or wasn't crystal clear about the specifics in terms of black empowerment? And is there a nexus? I mean, I thought, and I heard Malcolm say it a lot of times, that economic power was political power. But what I'm hearing you say is that political power is economic power. So if you could frame that for me historically.
Sure. So first of all, I don't want all the credit or the blame. So I'm not the one saying, I'm tracing a history. So Abram Harris was one of the early, for instance, critics of that Buy Black movement, the Du Bois contemporary. Du Bois eventually became a critic of his own argument around cooperatives. Malcolm shifted himself from having a more economically centered focus with the Nation of Islam to a more internationalist, anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist focus, anti-Zionist focus as he moved more beyond. So what I am saying is that, Abram Harris is the one who I point to off the top of my head, who at that early moment was the one saying the Buy Black campaign only benefits the black business owners. And
But isn't that black business owners, like you mentioned in Tulsa, etc., and other places, isn't that a step in the right direction for either the political or economic power? Because as a black business person, you do have some control over where you purchase, you mentioned, right? And who you hire, or how many people you hire, and what direction you go with your business. So isn't that a step towards empowerment?
So my immediate answer is no. But even within a context slightly to the right of my own politics, thank you. It's not a matter of do I like it or do I think. It's a matter of simple material reality. Black businesses cannot grow to any meaningful size to the point where they will be able to marshal the kind of economic strength that will close the political and economic gaps between black, white, or anyone else. So
I think Barry Gordy would disagree with you.
I'm sure he would. And he, in fact, he proves my point. Barry Gordy had to undermine and challenge and compete with any number of other record label music entities' efforts so that he could become the singular monopolizer of black talent. That's exactly my point. And then all we got was Barry Gordy. And then look at what did that mean in terms of the lived experience, the financial experience, the social experience of the people there. I don't know that I don't know if that's like I'm not looking at Barry Gordy like that's what I want. Like that's the world I want created. So that's sort of what I'm saying. Now what I've also tried to point out, and in the book I tried to be really arm's length with this, because I was trying to get people to focus on the argument and not my own political position. I ultimately think that's a flaw and was a mistake, and I wouldn't want to do that again. Because in the end, you just should be up front and just make the argument. But what I was trying to do was to show that across the political spectrum, that it didn't matter if you were a more conservative, business-centric person like Booker T, a more internationalist, Pan-Africanist, or African nationalist like Garvey, or if you become whatever the internationalist, Pan-Africanist radical of Malcolm, or if you become the form that Dr. King became, or if you were the form that Farrakhan has become, or the form that Amos Wilson was in African-centered consciousness, or the form that, it doesn't matter. Well, actually, I never accepted the myth, and the only person only luminary who I'd like to remind never accepted the myth was George Jackson. So that's why we should always salute George. But my point is that all across the spectrum, because of the popularity of the claim, black luminaries and the movements they influenced have adopted the myth in some variation at one point or another. Booker T might have thought the black dollar and business community could do certain things on a more conservative level. Garvey thought a black business effort might repatriate and reclaim the African continent. Others, Du Bois thought of it in a more cooperative form, but then he would later come back and say, cooperatives don't work. The only way they work is with federal government involvement, and if you have federal government involvement, you have socialism. So his point was, and this is often ignored in people doing this research, his point was, what I'm trying to argue here, that if we want actual change, you need political power. You need the power over the policy of a society, the ability to, again, define how wealth is determined, how it's created, who ends up with it, and everything else.
Yuri has a question.
A couple more questions.
Netfa had one, I think.
Netfa
Yeah.
first, and then Yuri, yeah. And Yuri, just like, we'll go on. Yeah.
We'll let them have the last word.
Too much of a question, is that all right?
Do your thing, man. You're welcome anywhere I'm at. Man.
Yeah.
Because I think I really always appreciate it. As many times I've heard you, talk about this and other things, I always appreciate it, reinforce the analysis and whatnot. I think one of the things that seems to be the pushback that I always hear is maybe an avoidance or an aversion to having, or set on having an individual savior or solution that's rests with an individual or small group versus what you are basically alluding to has got to be the masses. When we say organization, when we say socialism, that means we got to have empower. That means we have to bring in the people, even the most impacted masses of people. When we talk about what is the solution to economic freedom and whatnot, a lot of times I'm wondering if people are leaving out the vast majorities of suffering people who don't have no job, or if they have a job that's underpaying them, don't have no health care. Are we seeing that and trying to solve that? Or are we trying to solve something else? Because we got to know that the only way to solve that is, like you said, is to exercise some kind of political thing in which we can implement and decide and defend an economic policy that we create of our own. So, that's what I think. I think there seems to be in this society that does a good job of bombarding us with individualist thinking, and that we escape, and also how we look at history. Often, even the people that actually agree with us, we're looking at individuals and heroes and whatnot. We're not looking at resistance, the movements, and the organizations that they belong to, and the pushback that this, like those, like for example, Malcolm and everyone, or who, the Black Panthers, everyone who was trying to organize, the hammer came down on them.
Yeah.
Most people don't think about that. What that tells me is they were onto something.
Yeah.
They were onto something that we got to be onto. All this other stuff is really not. But anyway, I don't want to. So I kind of lost my.
No, I appreciate. But
But
part of what you're talking about, that at least as I is that the losing of the plot. But we don't have to speculate as to what Netflix just concluded with, that the documents show Richard Nixon. One of my favorite, more recently discovered example, I wish I had known it before I finished the book, was that Richard Nixon brought in talking about McDonald's, brought in Ray Kroc, the then owner of McDonald's, and told him, I need you to help me with this black capitalist narrative. And he said, I need you to do, you have a whole bunch of McDonald's, you have them in black communities, you have them where even white managers who don't have to go in there to physically work, they don't want to have to show up even at night to go pick up the receipts. So let's just create some black ownership, some black entrepreneurialism, some black franchisement. Hire some black owners to let them, it don't matter, let them have their little franchise in the hood. It will spread my narrative of redefining black power as black capitalism. It'll make, it'll save our poor white managers from having to go into these, the hinterlands, and, it'll save them. And then it'll also get these black power rights off my back. It'll get these, and the ones on the fence. It'll be like, well, if black power means I gotta, if I could do black power and all I have to do is say I own a store, hell yeah, I'm black power too. And that's how you end up with everybody starts claiming it, and then it starts to confuse and lose its important meaning. So yeah, in addition to the violent repression of the more radical wings of these movements, we do get these narratives that are from their own words, concocted by design. And then those of us of my age, you know, we grow up with Calvin, the brother of
that's right.
McDonald's commercial.
That's
we
right.
grew up with Calvin, and then I turned around and find out that Calvin was a psychological warfare plant
Yeah.
from Richard Nixon.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is really wild. So, but again, from their perspective, it makes perfect sense. Why wouldn't you do that? I mean, why? You know. The other point I wanted to raise, just real quick, that I've learned from this sort of the wing of this Abram Harris argument is that one of the important aspects or results of black communities being encouraged to the whole buy black, don't buy where you can't work and all of that, is that it takes them out of where they should be in their rightful place in the labor movement more broadly. They should be part of a broader labor struggle, of a broader political struggle, and instead of that, we get this conservative nationalism imposed that says, no, just do for self, and it can be all black, it will be all, you know, and that's just insufficient. And it is like the mirage of being at the HBCU where I teach. It's a good, perfect example. You're in this all-black East Baltimore, this all-black campus. I mean, I can literally go months without seeing one white face. But what I don't see is all the military investment, the Maryland state sponsorship and investment, and the banking investments, the AI. Morgan just took Mackenzie Scott's $60 million and invested it in an AI, where they say it's not going to cost us our jobs, but it is going to start doing things like grading and taking our counseling duties and you know, all this other kind of, but this is a black AI, and this is black Morgan, so, you know, so I'm saying, like, I mean, wow. So when I asked the president to his face, how about that McKinsey money, you know, dealing with some of these salary issues? Oh, well, you know, Dr. Ball, you know, because he reminded him, she said it's unrestricted. You can do whatever you want.
Wow.
He could have technically given me $60 million and said, Dr. Ball, start your little George Jackson Academy.
Yeah.
But no, we're going to build an AI.
Now, where are the power and the water for that AI coming from? So that's all.
You asking too many questions. Again, with the buying power thing, all I did was lift the hood. Then you cook. You're supposed to be regaled with black excellence.
Wow.
This is Morgan AI. This is Baltimore. This is so yeah. But honestly, don't ask me. I don't know. That's what the data center beef is out here, right? Isn't that what's going on?
That's right.
I mean, you know, don't look up.
Yeah.
But listen, I know we got to wrap. I really appreciate seeing some of my older comrades out here, and I don't mean by age, but I mean by time and struggle. And I thank all of you for showing up today. And again, Solomon, it's been an honor to be back here.
Thank you.
And as always, like Fred Hampton used to say, peace. You're willing to fight for it.
Thank you.